The kingdom of Doriath is gone. Nargothrond has fallen. King Thingol is dead. King Fingon is dead. High King Fingolfin is dead. Beren and Luthien are dead. The children of Húrin are dead. The free people have lost. Morgoth has conquered Beleriand. Evil has basically won. But there is one star in that blackness, one island in the Dark Lord's ocean, one hope all alone in the final years of the First Age. You've heard the name, now it's time to hear the tale, the story of the Hidden City, of Morgoth's last great enemy, of Beleriand's last chance to beat him. This is the tale of Gondolin. Maya, Govan and Melanine, and welcome to the first episode in this series explaining and breaking down Tolkien's epic First Age tale of Gondolin. Now, at the end of the last series, I talked all about the second kinslaying, which happened in the year 506 of the First Age. In the final episode of this series, we will arrive at the year 511 of the First Age, so this is going to move the overarching story forward by the time it comes to an end. But before we can get to the finale, we first have to start at the beginning. And in order to do that, we are going to have to turn back the clock. I've already talked at length about the history of the people and realms that aren't involved with Gondolin, but in this series I'm going to cover that same history but from the point of view of those who are. This is the other side of the First Age. It's 461 years of history from the perspective of Gondolin. And so, let's go back in time. To before the ruin of Doriath and of Nargothrond, before the lives of the children of Húrin, before Beren met Luthien, before the Battle of Unnumbered Tears or the Battle of Sudden Flame, before the deaths of High King Fingon and his father Fingolfin and his wonderful cousin Finrod Felagund, before even the coming of men into Beleriand. Our story begins in the year 50. At this time, Feanor has been dead for almost 79 years, and his brother, brilliant Fingolfin, is the new High King of the Noldor. 30 years ago, he held a great feast of reuniting called the Merith Adathad to bring together the different factions of the Noldor, as well as the Sindar under Elu-Thingol's rule, the Falathrim, loyal to Círdan the Shipwright, and the Green Elves of the Summery South. With this feast, he sowed friendship and prosperity among the many different elves in Beleriand. He set in motion a great era of peace. And at this time, High King Fingolfin ruled the northern realm of Hithlum. His firstborn son, Fingon, ruled the lands of Dor-lómin, and his second son, Turgon, ruled a region to the southwest of Hithlum called Nevrast, the capital of which was a storm-swept city standing on the coast overlooking the Sundering Sea. Its name is Vinyamar. And in this series, it is that second son, the younger brother, on whom we will turn our attention. Turgon, the elf who is destined to, one day quite soon, become the king of Gondolin. So, 30 years after the Merith Adathad, Prince Turgon and his spectacular cousin, Finrod Felagund, decided to take a trip together, just the two of them. They wandered south, following the river Sirion, until they came to a place known as Aili Nuial, the Meres of Twilight. This is the same place that Morwen and Mablung will traverse nearly 450 years later during the events of the Children of Húrin. And as Turgon and Finrod rest together in this mysterious marshland beneath a night of summer stars, both of them are suddenly laid to sleep by the same divinely powerful being. Remember the Valar? Well, you probably recall, after the Noldor's rebellion and the murder of the Teleri at Alqualondë, the official position of the Divine Valar was to withdraw. The Doom of Mandos pronounced that all of the exiled Noldor would be fenced off from Valinor, and the Valar themselves would not intervene in the Elves' war against Morgoth. Effectively, the people of Middle-earth are left to their own devices, while the Valar remain in the uttermost west. But there is one exception. One Valar who does not live in Valinor, one Valar for whom the rules simply do not seem to apply. Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, who dwells in water, and therefore witnesses more of Middle-earth's suffering than any of the rest of his people. He's still bound by the Doom of Mandos. He can't, raise an army or challenge Morgoth directly or anything, but he can send messages and warnings, and give quiet protection while remaining largely invisible in the rivers, in the lakes, and the pools of Beleriand. And in the year 50 of the First Age, that's exactly what he does to Turgon and Finrod. In their magically brought about sleep, both of these princes experience powerful dreams. Dreams that linger in their memories long after waking. Interestingly though, neither Finrod nor Turgon says anything about their dreams to the other. They both believe that they alone were given this message. Also, and this isn't stated anywhere by Tolkien, this is just my speculation, but considering that the Valar of sleep and dreams and visions is in fact Irmo, not Ulmo, I would postulate perhaps Ulmo might have recruited Irmo to help him out with the delivering of these messages. Anyway, the content of the messages was remarkably simple. Effectively, get ready. A day of evil is coming. Morgoth will strike back, and the free people will need secret strongholds from which to resist him. So get to work. As you already know, Finrod Felagund took Ulmo's advice very literally, and in the years that followed he built the secret underground kingdom of Nargothrond, inspired by King Eleuthingol's subterranean city of Menegroth. But Turgon took inspiration from a different city. He thought back to Tirion upon Tuna, the city on the hill far away across the sea in the uttermost west. The city that his grandfather, High King Finwë, ruled during the blissful noontide of Valinor, before Melkor was released from his long ages of imprisonment, the home that Turgon and his family have effectively been exiled from. He remembers its tall towers, its great fountains, and its 2 divine trees. But after a long time spent wandering alone in Beleriand, Turgon finds nowhere where such a city might be built in Middle-earth. And so he returns to Vinyamar to live in peace beside the sea. Until, in the following year, Ulmo appears to Turgon again. Not in a dream, this time he appears directly. He tells Turgon to set out from Vinyamar once more, but this time he will not wander aimlessly. He will follow Ulmo's direct instruction. The power in the water leads Turgon east. Once again, he comes to the vales of the river Sirion, but this time he is shown a new path. Ulmo guides him by secret ways into the encircling mountains. He follows a dry riverbed into a great ravine that will later become known as Orthalc Echo. And then he keeps going until suddenly a great green valley opens before him. A valley that no one has ever seen except for the great eagles that fly over it. Turgon looks upon a hidden plain called Tumladen, and in the middle of that plain he sees a hill, Amon Gwareth, just like the hill of Tuna upon which Tirion was built. After discovering this place, Turgon returned to Vinyamar, to his home, to where his people waited for him, and he spoke of the Hidden Valley to absolutely no one. Yet, in secret, he began to devise a plan. He intended to build a city, modelled on Tirion in the uttermost west, but shielded from the eyes of all beings save for the eagles of Manwë. 7 years later, Morgoth attacks. He unleashes an army of orcs upon Fingolfin's Noldorin forces, and thus begins the Dagor Aglareb, the glorious battle. With help from the king's nephew, Maedhros, in the east, the warriors of the Noldor smash apart the Dark Lord's invaders, and they win one of the greatest victories Beleriand will ever see. Angband is besieged, Morgoth is locked away, green grass grows up to the very gates of Angband, and for nearly 400 years, there is peace and prosperity in Beleriand. And this battle of glory is, in a roundabout way, the trigger that gets Gondolin going. While Morgoth is imprisoned, again, within his own iron fortress, and Beleriand is, for the most part, rid of his malignant influence, the unquiet of Ulmo once again stirs in Turgon's heart. Every day, from his hall in Vinyamar, he looks upon the sea, and he hears again the words that Ulmo spoke. And so, he summons into his service many of the hardiest and most skilled elves in Nevrast, and in secret, he leads them to the hidden vale of Tumladen. He brings them to the hill of Amon-Gwareth, and he tells them, "Here, we will build our new city, in the image of Tirion that we can never go back to." And so, Turgon's trusted elves of Nevrast begin constructing the city that he devised in his mind. A watch is set about the craftsmen to ensure their work remains totally unobserved, and the power of Ulmo, which runs through all waters, protects them. But the hidden city is not built overnight. For 52 years, Turgon's elves toil in secret. They build tall white walls surrounding a circular city, and near its center they raise an enormous Tower of the King. They build a central well and many great fountains. They build a great market, as well as a lesser market. They build many roads, including the Road of Archers, the Alley of Roses, and the Way of Running Waters. There are gardens, palaces, homes, and 2 great gates. But most wonderful of all is Turgon's own handiwork. Near the shining fountains and the smooth stairs by the court of the king, he creates, with elven craft, 2 extraordinary trees, in the likenesses of Laurelin and Telperion themselves. The golden tree he calls Glingal, and the silver tree Belthiel. Together, they shine with their own light, and fill all the ways of the city. This really is the closest thing to Tirion upon Tuna that could possibly exist on this side of the sea. And yet, despite using his Noldorin skill at crafting to bring these 2 trees into existence, for most of the 52 years spent constructing his city, Turgon dwells not in Tumladen, but back home in Vinyamar. After all, he has a people to rule over, and the time is not yet right for them to simply disappear. But as his secret city nears its completion, Turgon gives it a name. In the Quenya language of the exiled Noldor, he calls it Ondolinde, the rock of the music of water. Eventually, 52 years pass. Ondolinde is finally completed, 14 years after Nargothrond's completion. And so, Turgon decides it is time to go there, to depart Vinyamar and to abandon Neverust. He makes preparations. His great hall by the sea is emptied. But before he can leave it for the final time, he is visited once more by the Lord of Waters himself. Ulmo tells Turgon the moment has come. He says he will maintain his powers within the waters of Sirion to ensure that no one shall mark Turgon's going, and none shall find the hidden entrance to Tumladen without Turgon leading them. He promises the future king that longest of all the realms of the Eldar shall his city stand against Morgoth. But then Ulmo adds a warning. Love not too well the work of thy hands, and remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west, and cometh from the sea. He goes on to remind Turgon that as an exile from Valinor, Turgon also lies under the doom of Mandos, and the curse of the Noldor may find him too ere the end. Treason of kin unto kin might yet awake within his walls. And so, before leaving Vinyamar, Ulmo gives Turgon one last instruction. For if this peril of treason does ever draw near, he foresees that a messenger shall come from Neverust with a warning. And from this hypothetical future messenger, Ulmo foretells, beyond ruin and fire, hope shall be born. Turgon is instructed to leave in his Hall of Vinyamar 4 specific objects: a shield, a helm, a coat of mail, and a sword, so that in centuries to come this destined messenger might find them, and thus will Turgon know him. Then Ulmo returns to the sea, and Turgon does what he was told. And that is the very last thing he will ever do in his former home of Vinyamar. He turns his back on the ocean. He faces the hidden valley, and company by company, he leads his people on a secret exodus under shadow up into the encircling mountains. And no one else in all of Beleriand has any idea where the people of Neverust went. Now, Tolkien specifically tells us, out of all the Noldor who followed High King Fingolfin over the Helcaraxes to Middle-earth over a century ago, a third of them now travel with Turgon into his hidden city. But the Noldor are not the only people who Turgon takes. A greater part of his host are actually made up of Sindar, grey elves of the north who lived in this part of Beleriand before the coming of Fingolfin and the first rising of the sun. And these Sindar come to know Gondolin by a different name. They call it the Hidden Rock, which in their Sindarin language translates to Gondolin. And this leads me on a very interesting tangent, because from its very beginning, Gondolin is a bilingual city. Turgon, his household, and his Noldorin followers all speak Quenya. They presumably still refer to Gondolin as Ondolinde. And their city is the one place in Beleriand where Quenya is still widely spoken after Eleuthingol outlaws the language upon learning the truth of what happened at Alqualonde. And yet, a great many of Gondolin's inhabitants don't speak Quenya at all. The city itself becomes most widely known by its Sindarin name. Over time, many Sindar of the city learn Quenya, and many Noldor adopt Sindarin. Eventually there are children born with one parent from the Sindar and another from the Noldor. As the years pass, Gondolin develops a new Sindarin dialect containing regional elements and words adapted from Quenya. 2 separate languages blend. But you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, everyone in Gondolin is immortal. Most of the people who are going to be living there in like 400 years are the same people who left Neverust with Turgon. How does their language change when their generations don't die out? Well, it's a good question, and it points us to something that's really, really important within all of Tolkien's writings. Language is a marker for culture. Gondolin will be entirely isolated for centuries, and so its population seems to make a conscious decision to develop a new dialect of their pre-existing languages. They are cementing a new culture. They are building a new identity. They are ceasing to be Noldor or Sindar. They are becoming Gondolindrim. Anyway, the very last of Gondolin's inhabitants to arrive at the Vale of Tumladen is Turgon himself. He brings his household with him, and then the gates of the Hidden Way are shut behind him. Now, before I end this video, I want to briefly mention a few of the named individuals who journeyed with Turgon and who now dwell alongside him in his secret city. There's actually an awful lot to say here, and in the next episode I'm going to go into full detail on the great heroes of the Gondolindrim, but for now I'll keep the emphasis on just 4 of them. First up, we have the absolute legends Glorfindel and Ecthelion of the Fountain. These 2 guys are widely considered to be among the most epic elves in all of Tolkien's writings. They are the definition of fan favourites. And there's a very good reason for why that's the case. They are both spectacular. And within Gondolin, I think Glorfindel and Ecthelion of the Fountain can effectively be thought of as 2 of the Hidden City's most hyper-competent lords. They are King Turgon's right-hand elves, 2 of Gondolin's greatest assets. The other 2 individuals I want to mention before ending this video are less well known, I think, among casual fans, but much more important to the overarching story. The first of whom is a lady called Aredhel Arfaniel, the White Lady of the Noldor. Aredhel is a character that I have hardly mentioned on this channel yet, but she's been present in the background throughout quite a few of the earliest stories. She is the daughter of High King Fingolfin, and therefore the sister of Fingon and Turgon. She took part in the flight of the Noldor along with her father and brothers. She crossed the Helcaraxe with them, and in Beleriand she dwelt in Neverust with Turgon, before following him to Gondolin. And there is a hint of tragedy here, because the whole point of Gondolin is that it's secret. Once you're in, you can't come out. Similarly, anyone who isn't one of the Gondolindrim cannot go there and visit. The location of the Hidden City is one of Beleriand's greatest mysteries. Even High King Fingolfin doesn't know where his second son and only daughter have gone to, only that they have gone. And the last character that I want to mention right now is Fingolfin's only granddaughter, Turgon's only child, his heir, Lady Idriel Celebrindal, the far-sighted, whose name means sparkling brilliance. Celebrindal means silver foot. Idriel is another character who I haven't really talked much about just yet, but if you've been really paying attention, you might remember I did mention her ages ago when I explained the crossing of the Helcaraxe. Idriel was born in Valinor. She was presumably one of the youngest exiles who made the crossing to Middle-earth, and she was there with her father and mother, as her grandfather, Fingolfin, led his faction of the Noldor over the treacherous grinding ice. But during that crossing, tragedy struck the family of Turgon. both Idriel and her mother, Elenwe, of the golden-haired Vanyar, slipped and fell beneath the ice. Turgon risked his life to save them, but only Idriel could be pulled from the freezing water. Her mother Elenwe died there, in the bitter cold of the Helcaraxe, without ever setting foot on Middle-earth. And the reason why Elenwe matters, apart from as tragic backstory for Turgon and Idriel, is because she was the only one of the exiles who left Valinor that wasn't counted among the Noldor. She was full-blooded Vanyar. And don't forget, Turgon's own grandmother on his father's side, Indis, was also a full-blooded Vanyar, which means, despite being a princess of the Noldor, Idriel Celebrimbor is actually 5/8 Vanyar. More than half. No one else in Middle-earth has more Vanyarine heritage than she does. You know, Galadriel and her golden-haired brothers are only a quarter Vanyar. And this is more interesting than just a fun fact. Idriel seems to have gifts that other elves of Gondolin do not have. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but despite her youth and her relative isolation, she has a degree of wisdom that surpasses almost all the rest of her kin. Before this story's end, Idriel Celebrimbor will become one of its most important players. So remember her name, for we are told that of all the wonders found in Gondolin, the towers, the fountains, Turgon's gold and silver trees that radiate light across his city, there is nothing more wondrous than Idriel herself, whose golden hair shines like the golden tree Laurelin shone before the coming of Melkor. And speaking of Melkor or Morgoth, remember back towards the beginning of the story when he was in Valinor and he was trying to manipulate Feanor and Fingolfin to forge weapons and use them against each other? Well, in a later chapter, we are told that most of all Feanor and Fingolfin's kin, Morgoth feared Turgon. For of old in Valinor, his eye had lighted upon him, and whenever he drew near, a shadow had fallen on Morgoth's spirit, foreboding that in some time that yet lay hidden, from Turgon, ruin should come to him. By the year 116 of the First Age, Vinyamar is completely abandoned. It becomes an empty city on the western coast facing the sea, and it will remain that way for all the rest of Beleriand's history. Desolate, forgotten almost, a place where nobody will ever venture again, except for one. But roughly 150 miles inland as the crow flies, the people of Vinyamar and the wider region of Nevrast now have a new home, a hidden stronghold. And after Turgon arrives there with his closest household, the gates of the Hidden Way are shut. Gondolin becomes an island, separated from all the rest of Beleriand by its own secrecy. And for centuries, the Gondolin dream will live in bliss, untouched by the perils of the outside world. Their home will become the fairest place in all of Middle-earth. But life there will be defined by one simple rule: the king's law. No one might ever come in, and no one may ever go out. When Turgon arrives in Gondolin after it is fully wrought, he closes the great gates of the Hidden Way behind him, and for the next 200 years, they will not open again. So, that is where I'm going to leave things for today. But in the next episode, I will talk all about what life was like in those 200 years. I'll explain the great houses of Gondolin. We will get to see more of Glorfindel and Ecthelion of the Fountain, and also some other incredibly awesome elvish characters who I cannot wait to talk about. And we will spend a bit of time exploring Gondolin in the long years of its majesty and its glory. So, to make sure you don't miss that, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to click like and leave a comment on this video if you want to. You can now also support the channel on Patreon or on Ko-fi if you'd like to, so follow the links in the description to those pages if you are at all interested. And a great big thank you to everyone who has already donated. However, until next time, as always, my dear friends, much love, stay groovy, and Navair Melanin.